All right, hey guys, Colin here with Guinn Partners, and today we're going to have a little chat with Mark Halverson from Precision Autonomy. Thank you for coming by.
Not at all. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something obviously in the drone space and in UAVs, we all know that things are getting more and more autonomous. Obviously with autonomous vehicles, robotics in general, drones obviously play a big part in that. Drones just kind of doing work on their own. Obviously now we have so much more data, right? These things are laden with sensors. We know where they are, when they are, what they're doing, what the surrounding environment looks like at any given time. We know exactly when they're being used. Things that we didn't know with like an automobile in 1984, we didn't have any of that, right? And so how does that completely change the way we look at insurance? That's the kind of topic that we're going to get into here. And like, what is that, how does that kind of change our whole mindset around insurance?
Yeah, that's terrific, and appreciate you asking that question. First of all, the mission for Precision Autonomy is accelerating the world's safe adoption of autonomous services.
Okay.
And there's a lot of things that change. Drones are an excellent example of autonomy. It's a new, in insurance parlance, a new risk pool.
Yep.
And there's lots of other autonomous devices that are coming into play.
Yeah, even like little robots that are delivering food on the sidewalk. I mean, there's all kinds of useful autonomous things happening.
Oh, you see them everywhere. And when you think about, and these are semi-autonomous, but you also see it in healthcare and aging, and whether it's exoskeletons or whether it's home delivery, because there's a whole concept of aging in place that's becoming more and more important as many of the mature economies.
What do you mean by that, aging in place?
Well, basically, it's saying that instead of me as I age going to a retirement home or something of that nature, I'm actually going to stay in my home, and I'm going to be able to have people bring things to me. Right. So one part of mobility is me being able to get outside of the house and get to where I need to be. Another part of mobility is being able to bring things to me that I need, and you see a huge set of examples of that, and certainly with drones and under 30-minute delivery, things of that nature. Yep. So a lot of focus there. But precision autonomy is an insurtech business, right? So we're trying to put what we often describe as moral and ethical bounds using financial controls in the form of insurance.
Okay.
So that's really how we're trying to push the limits of safe adoption of these types of technologies, because as you say, at the moment it's very difficult to know what the risk is of some of these devices, right? So traditionally,
especially as they're just kind of coming into our purview in general, and just as they're getting adopted into different parts of the airspace, like we don't even really know, like, what is the risk? The FAA, that's what they keep asking us. Like, what are the risks? We got to figure it out.
Indeed, and what you'll recognize, insurance has often been a proxy for regulation, right? So as one would argue, or as I would argue, the horseless carriage would never be where it is today if insurance weren't backing it. So what we need to do, and what insurance has traditionally done, I should say, is take in sort of a 10-year history of what bad things have happened, and then try to draw propensity models forward. But exactly as you're describing, we have a new structure that we can work with, which is there's an IoT world that we now operate within, and in that world, we know who's doing what. We know not just smart devices; it's also smart environments.
Yes.
Right? We can start to know a great deal more than we ever have before about what these machines are doing. And again, traditionally from an insurance point of view, we see a series of major shifts, right? So one is risk in society is shifting from human beings to machines. Mm-hmm. That's just true, right?
Yes,
and we've seen that in the automobile. And many years ago, there was anti-lock braking. And you say, well, gee, are anti-lock brakes actually better than humans in terms of getting into dangerous situations? Yes, they are, right? So now we go further and further down that continuum, and you find that there's a lot of enhancements, and the risk is no longer about the operator of the device, or the car in that example, or the drone in this example, but instead about the machine itself.
Okay.
So fundamentally, risk is shifting from humans to machines. The second thing that's really interesting about the IoT space is that risk from an insurance perspective is moving from perceived risk, which is what I think the risk is that you represent, to actual risk, which is what are you doing right now? What's the machine doing? What's the weather? What's the context? Mm-hmm. So that's another significant shift. The third is around what we call usage-based insurance, right? So as you move further and further towards autonomous devices, you're not going to be in a position where you can charge by the year.
Yeah.
Right. So
it feels like a kind of antiquated model to say, I just want coverage all the time, even if my car is just sitting in the garage for 2 months when I go traveling, I'm still paying insurance on it.
Oh, indeed. I mean, on average, our cars will be dormant 98% of the time.
Wow.
And yet we pay for insurance by the year. And so with an autonomous device, the economics are going to be so much clearer to say, of course I'm only going to pay for the insurance when I'm exhibiting the risky behavior, right? I'm not going to pay for it when it's sitting in the garage. It's just not how it's going to work. And then the last part of it that we see is incredibly important is that insurance is a bit of a strange instrument. And what we really want to do is make it invisible to people, right? We want to embed insurance into processes that are already good processes, right? So if somebody is operating effectively with their drone or with whatever the device is, they should just be insured, right? So they should offer the data up, and this is true in almost every case. They should just offer the data to say, here's what I'm doing, and therefore I want to be insured for what it is that I'm doing. And if I'm operating safely,
that kind of looks like saying maybe I'm logged into some system or whatever, and I'm being transparent with how and where and when I'm using this thing, and all the kind of streams of telemetry coming off of all the sensors, and so just insure me.
Right.
Okay. Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, because then you won't have to worry about am I insured for this flight? Should I go out and do these things? It's simply do what you do, offer the information, and we'll be able to accurately price that information and the insurance. The other thing that's really nice about it, and frankly what we're trying to do, is push what we'll call a positive peer pressure in the industry to do better and better. Right? Because if you're offering all that information, the way to accelerate the world safe adoption is to ensure that everybody's operating in a similar way and being very transparent in that way. So if we can do that, what ends up happening is that everybody gets better. Right? So the prices will actually create that positive peer pressure, and everybody will start to operate a little bit better. And then we'll be able to see a greater adoption of these
and there'll be kind of a direct reward for operating safer. It won't be so you won't be so abstract, right? It'll be look, we know exactly how safe everyone's operating, and so there's more of a direct kind of benefit or carrot for operating safely within the guidelines.
And we can literally describe to someone what they would do differently if they wanted to pay less for insurance.
Wow.
Right. And that's one of the things that's it's quite unique, because as you say, most of the pushback is just saying, oh, well, I'm a very safe operator, therefore I should pay less for insurance. So, well, okay, prove it. I think that's what you end up finding is that those who anecdotally are the best pilots are oftentimes not actually the lowest risk. So that's why you want to have facts behind some of this activity.
And you guys have kind of been doing this for a little bit now, right? You guys have been collecting quite a bit of data, especially kind of in Australia and some of your...
We have indeed. So we've been operating in Australia for some time. We've got, it's called hundreds of thousands of flights that we've been trapping. But the one interesting thing about aviation and drones, particularly from an insurance point of view, the industry is a very strange one, because aviation insurance has traditionally been about a very small number of very large policies. Okay. Right? So you have massive manufacturers that are one policy. Right? Drones are just the opposite, right? So you've got thousands and thousands of these very tiny policies in many cases. And it's just very difficult for the insurers to make that a profitable business.
I can totally see that.
So that's why it's been a little bit difficult, and frankly why we started in with drones is that we've got a platform, we've got insights and algorithms and other things that will allow for this to be a very profitable business and to price it accurately. And that's sort of the nature of insurance.
Wow.
So just as a simple example, what we were finding with our carrier partner in Australia is that on average it was about 35 days to pay a claim for drones.
Wow.
The first one through our platform was paid in 20 hours. The second one in 13. Right, and 6 of those hours were actually the financial transaction occurring. So the opportunity to become more real time, to get people back up and flying, is
well, that's the point. You're paying all this money for insurance. It's like, especially if you're a drone operation out there and you have a system go down for whatever reason, if you're getting paid out in 30 days, you might miss 3, 4, 5 jobs during that time. And now that asset that you've put so much money into is just sitting there dormant.
Right.
And you're probably still paying insurance on it because you have some annual policy.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's seems like a much better user experience.
Yeah, we think that's going to be just massively important, because if we always say, if the propellers aren't turning, nobody's making any money.
That's right.
Right. So we've got to be rapid and support people so they can be back at work.
Yeah, and another kind of when I see like when I kind of visualize what does our future look like with drones, I kind of see these boxes of drones everywhere, and they can pop out and just go scan, and they may be used by a number of different data collectors and data transformation companies for a number of different end users. and it's almost kind of becomes this like shared asset across a bunch of different users. And so who is responsible at any given time? Is it just the manufacturer, or is it the company that decided when this thing was going to autonomously fly over here and do this task? Is it is it the company that's maintaining it? It's like it becomes such a like big problem that you can't just have like humans with Excel spreadsheets trying to figure that out. I mean, you need some type of kind of machine learning, algorithm to kind of figure that out, right? I mean,
absolutely.
It seems like a very big problem.
It is indeed, and there's a couple factors that you're talking about now. One is that those that operate assets are typically not the owners of assets anymore, right? So there's a lot of leasing that goes on. There's so a big leasing company is actually the owner of the asset. They want to make sure if you're operating the asset that you have insurance. So there's a shift there in terms of just because I own the car, that doesn't mean I'm the one that's on risk.
That's right.
So there's a concept of who's on risk, and that's a big part of what you were just describing. Because who's on risk is shifting all the time now.
Yep.
Right. So if it's a shared asset, and you think about the sharing economy, and you use drones as an example of that, the Uber for drones or whatever you want to describe it as, that risk is shifting constantly.
Yes.
So another reason that we're focused on this usage-based approach is because we can very easily do that and say, all right, well, who is it that's operating now? Therefore, who is on risk? Therefore, who is going to be accountable if something strange happens? And that's where, frankly, where regulators are having a really hard time because it's just not always obvious who it is that's operating.
You take it a couple steps further, like in full autonomy, especially when drones start being able to fly for hours and hours at a time. In one flight, you might have 3 or 4 different entities on risk in one flight because it's going to go up. It's going to collect data over here for this entity leasing the drone for their customer to transform a data model of a construction site. Then it's going to go over here and run kind of eye in the sky surveillance for the local PD for an hour at some event. And so in one flight, you might have multiple people on risk at a time. And so it's how do you figure that out in a manual kind of tracked system?
It can't be done.
It can't be done, right?
So that's why in the beauty of this IoT world that we now live in, we can start to trap and capture all that data and use it in a way that people actually want to be able to use it.
That's awesome.
And for us, as I already mentioned, insurance has often been a proxy for regulation. Regulation is too difficult to work with in these environments, particularly because this who's accountable for some of these things is not always obvious. So we do think that insurance is going to play a big role in helping that adoption of these types of technologies.
And so, I guess kind of maybe one of my last questions, like the executives of these large companies are bringing in drone programs, right? And they're trying to figure out, are we going to have a bunch of our own pilots get trained to go fly our cell towers and our transmission towers and mines and things like that? Are we going to use service providers? Like, as these executives are kind of building these profiles and figuring out what the cost and the ROI and all that kind of stuff, it's like, what should they be considering when it comes to risk? I mean, is there any like helpful, kind of?
Yeah, it's really interesting because the risk for a lot of big companies, what we look at is that the aggregation of the drone industry per se has already begun, right? And the industries that use them, it predominantly is going to be around construction and transportation and energy and media and entertainment and transportation, of course. So there's a lot of great examples of huge organizations that in many cases are for the first time ever taking on what's known as aviation risk in the form of drones.
Yes.
Right. So, if you go and talk to risk managers in those organizations, sometimes they say, well, I don't know what this means, right?
Yeah.
So what does it mean to me to have an issue associated with a drone, and how does that, what exposure does that create for my organization? And, I know we talked to some people who were worried about the Gatwick incident, if you recall that some months ago. And what ended up happening is that drone caused a ground stop.
Yeah, that was an accident. I was there. I was flying. I didn't even mean to. So, my bad.
Yeah, look if you want to. So the claim for the ground stop, if I remember the facts correctly, was about $140 million.
Wow.
So
I'm just kidding. That was not
right.
It's funny though, because we were at Gatwick like 2 weeks before that happened.
Is that right?
That happened like 2 weeks after we were there on Amazing Race. We'd flown into Gatwick, and it was like such a tiny little airport.
Yeah.
But wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. So that type of exposure is when when you're a big company, you need to start thinking about, well, what is that exposure? And if you were the one that was flying that created that incident, that's a problem. Right? So you really need to be able to manage that risk in a very precise way, and that's frankly what we're targeted to do.
Wow.
Is work with those big companies to make sure, one, they can manage their fleets through whatever software they want to manage their fleets through, but then provide us the data to allow them to see what that risk is.
Wow. And so you've got some kind of early, kind of proof of concept stuff going on here. You're bringing on clients now.
We are.
How's that going?
Oh, it's terrific. So a lot of what we're sort of transplanting the success we've had in Australia.
Yep.
It's a great test market. It's a great the regulations there have actually been quite a bit ahead. So we built a success. We did a lot of frankly a lot of design work, sort of human-centered design work with pilots and with drone operators to make sure that what we were offering was very seamless to them and very embedded. And we feel great about it. We feel great about how the pricing works. We feel great about the experience, and now we're starting to roll it out in the U.S.
Awesome. Precision-autonomy.com.
Correct. That's where we find us.
Man, very cool. Mark, thank you for coming by today.
I
really appreciate it.
Always fun to speak with you. Always fun to speak with you.
Awesome. Good deal. Thanks, guys.